Hey guys, this is Mr. Volk again, and I'm just here to give you some notes on the four logical appeals. You already hopefully are familiar with these. We learned about them in week 1 in the History of Rhetoric lecture. The four logical appeals are basically four things that we can do to appeal to our audience, four things that we can do to get people to agree with us. These four appeals are one of the oldest and most helpful concepts in the entire history of rhetoric. And if you look at pretty much any successful speech, I think that they use all of them equally, even if you don't always notice it. So the first of the four logical appeals is logos. Logos, just like it sounds, has to do with logic. It has to do with using logic, reasoning, and convincing evidence. Logos is basically the logical appeal that aims at the brain. It is a logical appeal that we use to try to get people to rationally assent to what we're saying. The most sort of obvious way to use logos is just to use facts and statistics, to use what we would think of as proof. And there are a lot more complex things we can do, but it's also important not to underestimate this one. We live in a society where a lot of people like to think of themselves as rational and scientifically minded, and they want to agree with positions that have proof. The key words here, though, in this sentence, don't underestimate the power of properly framed statistics and facts. The key words are properly framed, properly framed. In order to reason effectively and in order to be able to stand up to all of the different argument tricks and counterattacks and rhetorical figures and things that your opponents might use in a debate, it's important to carefully explain your statistics. Where did they come from? Why do they matter? Why do they definitively show what you say they show? It's important to give a story to your facts so they have context, so we know where they came from, so that they are part of a bigger picture, not just things you're kind of throwing at us. When we try to use logos, it's not just about dropping sort of proof. It can also be about using reasoning, kind of walking our audience through our thought process, showing why it's logical to think that what we're saying is correct. So there are several types of reasoning that we can use. The first is deductive. You're going to learn a lot more about deductive reasoning as this class goes on. The basic idea of deductive reasoning is that you take some sort of rule or principle, you take something that you believe to be always true or generally true, and you show that it applies to this situation. So, like in my example here, you might say that if you know, or you feel like you know, that high school students don't shower, which you guys would, I've never heard of such a thing. You guys are so clean and good smelling. But let's pretend that it's an alternate universe where high school students never shower, and we know that there's this person who's a high school student. Therefore, we can make the assumption that unless this is an extreme case, that rule probably applies to that person. Inductive reasoning is where we kind of build a general principle. We build a new rule, a new thing that we believe is generally true by building examples. So inductive is sort of the opposite of deductive. So in my example here, we would start with looking at the facts, looking at what's going on, and then coming up with some sort of theory based on that. And this example is a little bit confusing because it's written sort of backwards. But in this example, maybe we've looked around Westeros, we've seen all these families, all these houses that are causing problems, and this is sort of the induction that we're making. This is the new kind of general idea we're arguing for based on examples. So deductive, inductive, it depends on whether you're starting with a rule and trying to apply it with your evidence, or whether you're looking at your evidence and trying to come up with a new rule. But those are both basic reasoning steps that logical people use. Causal is when we can prove that one thing resulted in another. Causal is very tricky because it's difficult to prove that two things actually have a cause and effect relationship. We all know hopefully we know the old saying, correlation does not equal causation, which means that just because two things happen around the same time, or because two things are sort of associated with each other, does not mean that one caused the other. So it's almost difficult to give like a short, goofy example of causal reasoning, because causal reasoning takes time, it takes facts, and it takes a specific kind of chain of evidence to prove. But causal reasoning is also incredibly powerful. let's say that we want to enact a new law. We want to enact a law that promotes healthier lunches in schools. But we can prove without a shadow of a doubt, causally, that if that happens, there will be a lot of low-income students who can no longer get reduced lunches, and that those two things are inextricably linked, that one will cause the other. Well, even if those aren't all the students in the nation, and even if there's still plenty of good things the law would do, people are very hesitant to do something that they know will directly cause a bad thing, even if there's plenty of good that might seem bigger than the bad. People do not want to cause problems, so causal reasoning is effective. The last is analogical. Analogical reasoning comes up quite a bit in politics. It comes up quite a bit in theology. Anytime we're talking about a very big, complicated system, like the world that we live in, analogical reasoning is important. Analogical reasoning is when we compare one idea or situation to another idea or situation, usually to try to predict what might happen. So let's say that we want to go to war. We want to go to war with ISIS. We want to go to war with the group that's controlling parts of Syria and Iraq. And this is a real issue in the news right now. We're trying to debate if we should go to full-out war with them, what modes of military engagement with them might even look like. The only way we can really argue about that is to use analogical reasoning. We could say, well, look what happened in World War II. Look what happened in Vietnam. Look what happened in the first Gulf War. Look what happened in the Iraq conflict. People who want to argue for or against attacking ISIS have to use analogical reasoning. They have to use analogs to other wars or other foreign policy situations to try to predict what's going to happen. So analogical reasoning is very powerful. Similar to causal reasoning, we don't want to make mistakes. We don't want to do something that is very similar to another thing we did that didn't turn out very well. We don't want to believe something that's similar to something that we don't believe. Analogical reasoning, though, is easy to poke holes in because it's very rare in the world that two situations are really that much similar. When we talk about things that are as complicated as war and as laws, as philosophical beliefs, those things are so complex and so nuanced that it's difficult to find a situation with a perfect analogy. So analogical reasoning is kind of a high stakes thing. It can be very powerful, but it also can have kind of holes poked in it very easily. So when we're thinking about how to use reasoning, we have to kind of work with what we have. Do we have rules and general principles we want to apply? Do we have a bunch of examples and we think we can make a theory or rule out of them? Are we seeing a cause and effect relationship? Are we seeing analogical situations from the past? If we have those kind of raw materials, we can start to go a certain direction with building some reasoning. We will learn more about logical fallacies later. In the corridor, logical fallacies are sort of the holes in logos, or the ways that we sometimes use logos in ways that are sort of cheating or don't actually work. For now, don't worry too much about logical fallacies. Pathos. If logos aims at the head, pathos aims at the heart. Pathos is how we appeal to the audience's emotions. The most obvious things we might do are to get people to laugh or cry, to get people to see us favorably because of humor, or to get people to feel very sad and kind of be emotionally on board with something that we're saying because through that way. But there's lots of other ways we can use it. We're going to talk about them. The first principle to understand with pathos is that pathos is sort of like storytelling. Pathos requires descriptive and detailed language. And pathos is the reason why, like I say here, sometimes numbers and facts and statistics don't resonate with us at all the same way that one example might be, that might do. So if we're talking about something like the Ebola virus and we say, oh, this many thousand people, this percentage of people, it's multiplying at this rate, whatever, for most of our audience, those numbers are not going to resonate. They're not going to stick with us. We might go say like, oh man, that's a lot. But a story of one child who gets the Ebola virus and their family goes through this devastating process of selling everything they own to try to treat it, and there isn't sufficient medical care in their area, and there's total chaos in the system, and the Western aid doctors are leaving them, totally stranded, and the child slowly, painfully dies over 2 weeks or whatever, like some sort of terrible story like that. that's going to stick with us. As crazy as it might seem, as weird as it might seem, that human beings are built this way, people are going to get more motivated to help the one child, the one homeless person, the one sick dog, whatever, if they know the details of that story, than they are to help the 10,000 or the 6% or the whatever. So that's a big principle with using pathos. One way to use pathos also is to think about it as sort of climbing up a ladder, kind of climbing up a ladder. That there are two ways to think about this, two similar concepts. One is to think about how we can access the more easy emotions in order to get to the more complicated emotions. This is the reason that speakers use humor. This is the reason why speakers might use kind of gross or shocking facts. There are some emotions that we feel more comfortable expressing in public. When we're sitting in an audience, it's easier for us to sit next to a stranger or a friend or whoever and laugh than to cry. It's easy for us to go, ew, than it is to go, oh man, we seriously need to make a change. So there's some emotions that are easily accessed. There's some emotions that we feel comfortable showing in public. But it's important to get the audience to tap into those emotions, to sort of loosen them up, get them to ooh and ah, get them to laugh. Later, if you do that right, you earn sort of the right, you earn the ability to get them to feel higher level emotions, more private, more complicated, more vulnerable emotions. Genuine empathy, regret, sadness, a sort of indignation or righteous anger, desire to change their lives. You have to aim for kind of the lower, easier, more common emotions in order to work your way to the higher emotions. And this is true in interpersonal communication too. If you're having a serious talk with someone, if you're having what will end up being a very emotional talk with someone, you have to work your way to it. You have to warm them up. When you're trying to persuade people, you can also think about the hierarchy of needs. The hierarchy of needs is an idea from psychology that basically says that at the bottom of the pyramid, we have things that we need, such as, we need to stay dry, we need to keep eating, we need to have shelter, and, we need to be healthy. And then, if you were dropped in the middle of a desert island or something, your first concern would not be, am I really doing what I should be doing with my life? Am I happy with my romantic relationship? Whatever. No, your first concern would be, what am I going to eat? How am I going to get out of the sun? Whatever. The higher level needs, though, if you have your lower level needs met, if you have a house, if you have food, if you have a few friends, you start thinking about things like, what are my hopes? What are my dreams? What are my anxieties? Am I mentally and emotionally healthy? Am I living the life that I hoped I would live? What do I really think about God and the universe? Do I have integrity? Am I the kind of person that I want to be? Am I comfortable with who I am? So one way to think about it and how to apply this term to persuasion, how to apply this idea, is to kind of work your way up and down the hierarchy of needs. If you want people to make a change, if you want people to support a political idea, if you want people to agree with you on a big complicated issue, it's important to try to tap into things all along the hierarchy, which is why presidential candidates give speeches where they will say sort of, basically, vote for me if you don't want your children to get blown up, vote for me if you want to not run out of food and money, but they'll also say sort of, vote for me if you want to be the best America we can be, vote for me if you love freedom, vote for me, for God and country, these more kind of abstract, higher level things. So to tap into these hierarchy of needs, think how you can convince people that agreeing with you relates to both kind of their lower, everyday, simple, survive, get food, get money type needs, and their higher needs. Help them be loved, help them be accepted, help them grow as a person, help them, serve God and live up to their values, whatever. It's also important that you're precise in your aim with emotions, that you don't just try to stir them up, that you don't use humor kind of pointlessly, that you have a clear goal of what you want them to feel, and that if you want people to make a change, especially, you need them to feel empowered. You don't just want them to feel frustrated and hopeless and, oh man, this world is so messed up. You need to help them feel that they can help, they can change. And we see this, by the way, in a lot of like videos for like nonprofit organizations and things like that. And these organizations are wonderful; they do good work. But one of the formulas they use is to have a video at the beginning. It's kind of sad and quiet and dark and black and white or whatever, and they describe all these terrible social problems and all these bad things that happen. And it gets you emotional. You think this is terrible. This is makes me so sad. This is how could this be? But the video doesn't leave you with that's terrible. So maybe we can do something. I don't know. Like the video then shifts into sort of bright music, crescendoing music, bright lights, people smiling and laughing, volunteers telling you how great it was to make a difference, people telling you how if you only support their organization, they really can change and fix this problem, whatever. They access your emotions with the negative, the troubling, the sad, but they don't leave you there. They don't want you to feel defeated. They don't want you to feel depressed. They want you to feel empowered. They want you to feel like this. Yes, this is a problem. Yes, I feel something about it. Yes, it makes me heavy-hearted. But the real message here is that I can do something about it. And that kind of leaving you in the right place, I guess, is a really important part of effective pathos. Your actual presentation matters quite a bit in pathos. People want to see expressive body language. They want to hear a voice that sounds emotional. They want to hear that you're feeling it. They want you to smile and laugh if you're trying to be funny. They want to see you connect with them with your face and with your eyes. You need to show them that you're feeling something, that you want them to feel something if you want to access their emotions. The third of the 4 appeals is ethos. Ethos, appealing to your own credibility or character. This is basically not so much about what they feel or what they think. It's about who you are. It's about how they see you. Ethos, there's a lot that you're going to learn about ethos. It's all good stuff from Thank You for Arguing. For now, I just want to talk about 3 basic qualities of ethos: knowledge, sincerity, and likability. People want to know that you know what you're talking about. They want to know that you mean it, and they want to know that you're relatable and that you're someone that they can get along with. To have knowledge, to show that you're knowledgeable, you want to, like I said earlier, properly framed evidence. Cite sources, explain your evidence that you're using, show that you've done your research. Emphasize your life experience, emphasize people in your life that maybe you're close to or have talked to who are experts. Speak intelligently. Don't sound like you don't know what you're talking about. Don't say like, I don't know, or I guess, or things like that. Dress professionally. Use terminology, use technical terms, advanced vocabulary, but explain it. Help us understand it too. That'll help us feel like we're learning and that you're the smart person who's helping us learn. Don't be condescending. Don't say things like, most of you guys probably don't know this, but don't say that sort of thing. You're helping them learn. You're not kind of showing them, oh man, like I'm pretty smart about this. Let me, drop some knowledge bombs. Don't be confusing, but also don't oversimplify. Don't make things too basic. Treat your audience like intelligent people that you want to help have even more perspective on your issue. To establish your sincerity, this is sort of like a how to fake like you are nice and caring. How to establish that you are sincere. But no, it shouldn't be fake. It should be real, but there are ways of showing it strategically. You want to use personal anecdotes. You want to show that you do have commitment, you do have experience in this issue. You don't want to have your body or your face, and this happens a lot when you get nervous, and I understand it. It's not cool to care about things all the time. It's not cool to take things seriously. It's much easier to smirk and be sarcastic and ironic and apathetic. But when you're up here talking, you need to cut that out. If you ever want to communicate successfully to adults, you need to get rid of the unnecessary sarcasm about serious issues. You need to get rid of the monotone, I don't really care about this type of voice. You need to get rid of kind of sighing and eye rolling and shrugging. Don't be afraid to say things that you mean and to say them like you mean them. Please, please try to cut out some of that stuff when you're talking about serious topics. Instead of that, you want to be energetic and confident. You want to show your audience that you're engaged, that you want them to be engaged. Also, like I said earlier, show your emotions. And try to do all of this without being preachy, without telling them like you should feel this way, but you're not actually showing that you feel it. With feeling, with conviction, you want to show, not tell. To establish that you are likable. Again, it sounds like I'm writing a guidebook for like aliens or something, but it's important to be thoughtful about our likability and relatability. It all starts with our hook. It all starts with our ability to grab the audience, to make them interested right off the bat. Be relatable. Don't be afraid to be conversational. Talk like you're talking to a person. Don't talk like you're trying very, very, very hard to remember the things you wrote down last night. Don't try not to be arrogant. Don't be robotic. Don't seem scared. Seem like you're confident. Seem like you are comfortable with who you are. Maybe you're making mistakes. Maybe it's not perfect, but so what? It's a speech and speech class. The point is not to be perfect. The point is to communicate something effectively. Try to loosen up. Do what you need to do to get loose and to be kind of comfortable in your own skin. Open your body. Use inviting, motivational body language. Spread your arms. Stand with your legs, shoulder width apart. Don't shrink behind the podium. Don't hide up against the wall. Open your body. Be confident. Start from the beginning of your speech smiling, projecting positive energy, make it seem like you want to be there, like you're happy to give this speech. Be humble, be grateful, thank the audience, thank them for listening, say that that you appreciate them, paying attention. Show that you have things in common with them, that you aren't some expert. You don't think that you're somehow special just because you have certain knowledge or certain passion about a certain topic. Admit that you're ignorant about some things. Admit areas where you might be wrong or where you're unsure. Walk them through your own learning process. Don't pretend that you've just always known everything about your topic. Help them understand how you have come to know about it. And finally, mythos, probably the most complicated, perhaps even the most powerful, though, of all the logical appeals. Mythos is when we appeal to our audience's sort of cultural values, worldview, beliefs. We can do this by referencing cultural things that we all have in common, songs, stories, sayings, idioms. We can also do this by referencing figures and leaders that we all respect and love. At a more abstract level, we can use sort of the narrative structures, the stories that our culture values. We can try to make our speech follow the narrative structures that our culture values, whether that's a structure of redemption or success or whatever it might be. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in the next screen. Americans love stories of self-made people that you can start at the bottom and work your way up. I guess Canadians love those stories too, Drake. Christians love stories of redemption and hope. That's the whole story of Christianity, is a story of redemption. Oftentimes teenagers love stories of sort of individualism. Young people love stories of learning how to be yourself in a place where people seem to conform or people seem to not appreciate you. The young people can often relate to stories or want to relate to stories of people who are mean or who are bad or who seem like they're just so, no one will ever stop them or stand up to them, and then someone does. If you're talking to people who are, activists, who are people who stick up for the little guy, they might love stories of disenfranchised people standing up for their rights, David versus Goliath. If you're speaking to a bunch of leaders, a bunch of CEOs or school principals or something, they would probably love stories about, wise, thoughtful, successful leadership, or about, staying the course over a long period of time and how a vision pays off. You want to think about kind of the values, the stories that people tell themselves, the ways that they hope the world works, that they want to believe the world works, and you want your arguments to kind of tap into those things. You want to play off of those things and to leverage those things to help them agree with you. You want to not base your argument off mythos that your audience doesn't hold. It would not be effective to give a speech to an audience of King students that was, say, heavily based off of Buddhist values or heavily based off of, anarchist values or something like that. There are plenty of audiences in the world that would respond extremely well to both of those things, but your audience is a specific group of people, and you need to think about their mythos and how you can help them see that what you are saying, even if they don't agree with you on this specific issue yet, that there's a way that it fits their mythos. And that's really the power of mythos. The pathos, logos, and ethos, They might be easier. They can get us to kind of right at the moment engage with something. But mythos has a very, very special potential to convince people that something that they don't currently believe, they actually should believe it, that it's actually consistent with their values in ways that they haven't thought about yet. So let's say that you're talking to a group of people who are Christians, but they're very wealthy. They all they very much believe in capitalism. They believe in pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. Some of those people might not be inherently sympathetic to homeless people. They might think, why don't they get jobs? Why don't they get themselves off the street? If I can work hard, why can't they work hard? The way to get at those people is not to use the mythos of sort of social support or something like that. Not to say, oh, why isn't government taking care of these people? Why can't we just tax rich people a little bit more in order to keep all these people off the streets? There are audiences where that mythos works. A bunch of wealthy people who believe in sort of the American dream mythos are not necessarily going to respond to the idea that the government should just fix it if only they could raise taxes. They will, though, respond to the idea of Christ. They might respond to the idea that Jesus wanted us to love homeless people the way that we would love him if he were here. They might respond to it not so much as a narrative of the government solving people's problems, but rather as a narrative of grace and redemption. That if people could only be given one chance, that they could have a sort of redemption. You have to think about how to fit the change that you're arguing for, how to fit the values that you want your audience to embrace to the worldview that they have. And you don't want to bark up the wrong tree. You don't want to kind of try to tap into a mythos that they don't hold or that they don't even like. You want to show them how doing this good thing, believing this right thing, actually does work within their worldview, that there is a place for it within the theology, within the politics, within whatever that they hold. All right, so that's the 4 logical appeals, and these are things that we're going to be using basically in every speech and that we're going to learn a lot more about as the quarter goes on.